This is Scott from the NIBIRU channel. It is April 6, 2017, and we have a lot of information to talk about dealing with space weather and also the weather around the world. But let's first start with what is occurring on our sun. Now, we touched on this a little bit yesterday whenever we were speaking with our physicist pertaining to all of the coronal holes and the damage to the sun and the danger that this creates to our planet. Now, over the last 48 hours, we've been watching the coronal holes opening up on the sun, and if you just follow my cursor, once again, we can see a very large coronal hole in the northern hemisphere of the sun. It is actually breaking through and moving towards the center of the sun. This is not completely open, however, we do have a very, very large coronal hole, once again, in the southern hemisphere of the sun. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we look at this information, and I want you to pay very close attention to this, is because this is where the solar wind and these very highly charged particles come from, and this is what exactly impacts our Earth. Now, taking a look at our magnetosphere, this is our protection from the solar wind. As you can see, we are being buffeted by these highly charged particles, and this is going to continue probably for the next 5 to 7 days. Will it get a little bit better? Probably, but what we've been seeing over the course of the last year is just a constant coronal hole opening that comes around the sun and it eventually faces the Earth. Now, what you're seeing right now, you're seeing some medium to high density particles that are impacting our magnetosphere. However, it doesn't look like it did 3 weeks ago whenever we had a complete collapse of our magnetosphere. Now, looking at the solar winds, something that is quite alarming, and I've mentioned this before, if you follow my cursor right here in the front, now this is where the solar winds are impacting the Earth. If you take a look at the length of these black arrows, these arrows actually signify the strength of the solar wind. The stronger the solar wind, the longer these arrows will be. Now, you do see some of these arrows right here behind the Earth that are actually reversing themselves, and this is bringing more radiation into the area of our planet. Now, taking a look at the radiation, you can see in the dark red, yes, that is bad. That's very bad. Even the yellow that is encompassing the entire Earth, this is also very bad. And we've been seeing this on and off for quite a while now. And again, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to be spending any amount of time outside, I would definitely have some form of protection, possibly thin, long sleeve shirts, maybe a hat, but there's really not much you can do. You can't live a sheltered life inside. Everybody needs to work. You need to go outside. But, I myself, I've been wearing thin, long sleeve shirts, a hat, definitely sunglasses. Once again, the UV is off the chart, and there's not much we can do about it, but just protect ourselves. And dealing with all of this, the solar winds, these highly charged particles bombarding the Earth, well, naturally, moving into the earthquake chart, this is an up-to-date earthquake map, and you can see just scattered everywhere around the globe. And ladies and gentlemen, not all of the earthquakes are listed on this particular map. We actually have to go to several different internet sites to pick up all of the earthquakes, and we've seen an uptick in the magnitude of these earthquakes. Now, a lot of them were ranging in the high 3 and 4 magnitude. Now we're starting to see a major uptick into the magnitude of 5 and even 6. We had a very strange earthquake last week in Botswana, Africa, South Africa. Very, very rare for them to have any earthquakes at all, but they had a very large one. And right before that, they had a magnitude 5.2 in Johannesburg. So if you do live in any of these areas, I do ask that you just start to make some type of preparedness plan so you do not get caught off guard. Now, looking at another map, and this is the European map, you can see all of this activity, and this is all within the past 24 hours. Now, the country of Turkey and Greece, the Mediterranean, going up into Italy, very, very active. And I'm just hoping that we don't see a catastrophic earthquake in the high 6 or 7, because that will be devastating. Taking a look at the European world map, you can see there is activity all around the Ring of Fire. Now, this does not include the United States, just a little bit of South America, but believe me, South America is receiving a lot of earthquakes all along their west coast. The same does apply for the west coast of Mexico. Now, they've been under siege for the past year, nonstop, magnitude 3, 4, and 5 earthquakes every single day along this west coast of Mexico. Getting into volcanic activity for April 6, 2017, there are currently 30 volcanoes in full eruption around the globe. So once again, this is a considerable uptick in what we normally see as far as our volcanic eruptions around the globe. Now, something that I have been taking a look at, what you're looking at is the mimic map, and what this is showing you, and what I want you to see, is how hot the air is around the equator. And yes, I know the equator is the hottest area on our planet, but as you can see, it is actually very, very hot, and all of these air currents are pushing all of this moisture directly into the South Pacific. So we are going to see a continued amount of climate chaos, especially in that region. They're going to probably, go through a lot of catastrophic flooding, landslides. There were several landslides in South America that wiped out a whole entire town in a matter of minutes, and they still do not know how many people are missing or how many people have died. And this catastrophic flooding and these landslides, listen, they can come out of nowhere. They sound like a freight train, and the next thing you know, you're gone. Your villages are gone, your towns are gone, and it's very, very dangerous. So I'm going to keep on having these space weather updates every single day to let everyone know what's going on around the world and what's going on with our sun. Now, one thing that I did want to take a look at, this is our jet stream. And once again, it is all broken apart and very, very erratic. And normally getting into this time of the year, now we were just looking at that airflow straight across the equator, straight across Africa, straight across the Pacific. Now, normally these weather patterns that start around this time of year, they'll usually roll right off of Africa and start coming up into the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. This is where all of the hurricanes come from that impact the east coast of the United States and the Caribbean. But what I'm seeing is this airflow is actually going the opposite way. The other map will not show up as far as the equator goes. But looking at the South Pole region, again, these airflows just seem very, very erratic. And this will cause very erratic weather around the world. Now, looking at the North Pole, once again, we have portions of the jet stream that are completely broken apart. They are very, very erratic. And again, this will cause very, very severe weather patterns. And these weather patterns and anomalies, they will just sneak right up on you. And the next thing you know, you're either having a hurricane, cyclone, tornado, or massive rainstorms and thunderstorms. And we are already seeing it in the United States. And there are many, many other countries around the globe that are seeing it. I was just reading a report about the intense heat in India. And we need to pay very, very close attention to our weather around the world. And if you have any questions pertaining to the solar weather report, simply drop me an email at NIBIRU PlanetX 2016 at gmail.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. This is Scott from Planet X News and the NIBIRU channel. Thank you for watching. Hello everybody, welcome back to Planet X News. This is Scott from the NIBIRU channel. It is April 6, 2017, and we have a lot of information to talk about dealing with space weather and also the weather around the world. But let's first start with what is occurring on our sun. Now, we touched on this a little bit yesterday whenever we were speaking with our physicist pertaining to all of the coronal holes and the damage to the sun and the danger that this creates to our planet. Now, over the last 48 hours, we've been watching the coronal holes opening up on the sun, and if you just follow my cursor, once again, we can see a very large coronal hole in the northern hemisphere of the sun. It is actually breaking through and moving towards the center of the sun. This is not completely open, however, we do have a very, very large coronal hole, once again, in the southern hemisphere of the sun. And ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we look at this information, and I want you to pay very close attention to this, is because this is where the solar wind and these very highly charged particles come from, and this is what exactly impacts our Earth. Now, taking a look at our magnetosphere, this is our protection from the solar wind. As you can see,